Hi, all. Welcome. This is Alex Courson calling in from Veriato. I'm the Director of Sales and Business Development over here. And we also have Natasha Boyko, the Director of Digital Community over at Kaseya, joining me to discuss the dark web. We're going to give it a couple of minutes so that everybody can jump on who registered. It looks like we've got people actively signing in, so just bear with us for a few minutes.
Alex, love the animation on that slide transition.
You know, I can't take credit for that. That's that was the marketing department putting animations in, and I was real proud. And we've got more people jumping on, so I'll give it another maybe 2 minutes or so, if that works for you. You got any place to be?
No place to be.
Okay, cool.
Just wandering around the four walls of my apartment over and over
Oh,
again.
that just sounds lonely and very quarantiny.
Very quarantine.
And everybody, if you hear a giant dinosaur of a dog in the background, I apologize in advance. All right, it is about 12:04. So, Natasha, if you're okay with it, I'm just going to go ahead and get started. And if people are late to the game, then they can see the recording. Does that work?
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. So, for those of you who are just joining, just to repeat myself, my name is Alex Courson. I'm the Director of Business Development and Sales over here at Veriato. And I am joined by the lovely and incomparable Miss Natasha Boyko, the Director of Digital Community over at Kaseya, formerly the all-encompassing ID agent guru. So she knows everything there is to know about the dark web, and it made a lot of sense to do a joint webinar because a lot of people are kind of getting used to this whole, I almost hate to say it's the new normal because that's what everybody's kind of saying. And it's just sort of the situation we're all in right now. So that's what we're here to help you sort of navigate through. And before I start off, I'm going to actually launch our first poll question. And this is something for, I don't know if you can see it. Natasha, did you see that pop up?
I did, but it looks like we've got the security awareness training one, so we might want to.
Oopsies.
Oh, we've got a bunch of
Oh,
people
we've
answering
got
anyway,
answers
though.
anyways. All right, all right. We got the wrong one anyways. So the first question is, do you require your team to have any sort of security awareness training? Which, you know what, it doesn't matter when we ask that one. It's kind of important all the
Yeah.
time. It works.
Looks like we've got pretty decent split here. 60-40, it looks like, or so.
Yep, yep. Like people are still answering in. We've got 60-40 for sure. Okay, cool. And The reason why we're asking this is because of the 5 reasons the dark web is just kind of booming right now. And I wanted to go into this so that you knew why we were even having this type of a webinar. So, first one is that funds are flowing through cryptocurrencies. So, and Natasha, you could probably jump in here at any time. So if you want, interrupt me, or just say, hey, you got it wrong, right? So the funds are flowing through cryptocurrency, and the anonymity of Bitcoin has led to the dark web market really flourishing through the enablement of sellers and buyers to execute trusted transactions without knowing each other's identities. So, for example, each Bitcoin transaction, because they're kept private and only revealing their wallet IDs, it's keeping that user's transaction private, which is allowing it to enter criminal markets and get involved in buying illegal goods, which I don't want to step too much on Natasha's portion of the presentation, but it sort of gives you a little bit of insight into what that dark web is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just speaks to how, and all of these points, just how easy it is for criminals to make a ton of money off of these data sets and different types of personal information that's being sold. So it's pretty scary.
Yeah, I mean the rise. I actually have a cool statistic here. It's in 2012, there was 250 million Bitcoin transactions on the dark web, and then like spiked into 2018. All of a sudden, they're at 872 million, and then it went to over a billion in 2019. So it's ridiculous the type of margin that these people are dealing with, and they are running it like a business, right? And we've got a
Yep.
growth of the networks that are completely autonomous and anonymous here, right? We've got Tor secured browsing technology, which is remaining the largest network with more than 2 million active users connected directly to its service. You've got the bandwidth capacity of the network increasing from 50 gigs in 2014 to over 300 gigs in 2018. And again, it's just going and growing exponentially throughout. So by 2020, end of 2020, I would assume, and it's never good to assume, but based on this growth, I would assume that we're well over like a terabyte past, right? So we're pushing. Um, and then you've got the ransom payouts. So that's really what we're here today to help you prevent, because A, you need to understand what your security stack is internally, right? And I should have had a poll open for everybody so that I understood if we have more of the CTOs in the internal IT versus the CEOs out here. But whoever's on, we should be having a pretty good mix of internal threat detection, external threat detection, as well as a backup. So you never have to pay those ransoms. And we're going to show you how to do that a little bit later on, especially because this quote unquote new norm is in place. So we want to make sure that you guys are good. Um, a good example is Riviera Beach. I'm calling in from Florida, so it's an easy reference for me. But in 2019, Riviera Beach City in Florida got their systems hacked by cyber criminals, and they ended up paying 65 bitcoins, which is equivalent to $600,000 to attackers as ransom. And it's just building, right? We've got the Korean web hosting firm Internet Nyana. They paid 1.14 million in ransom payments, and that's considered right now to be the biggest ransomware payout today. Unless, do you know of another one that was bigger, Natasha? You're more in tune with that stuff than I am.
Not off the top of my head. That's a pretty big one. So that
Yeah.
should definitely, that's definitely up there.
And then what we want to do also is understand that the increased profitability is creating a real and true job market on the dark web, right? So it's kind of that gateway drug, right, where you have little ransomware, and then all of a sudden it turns into a full blown operation. And then because of how we are all working, I mean, as some of you heard, Natasha was, pacing around her condo like a tiger because she can't go anywhere right now. We're all in quarantine still. So so the attack surfaces are increasing just by the sheer instance of how people are working right now. You've got people that are accessing from home networks. It's less secure. Even if you're going through a VPN or you're thin clienting in, you still have these holes, right? And these pockets. Or what happens when you disengage from that, but you're still using the same types of credentials out on the web, right? But you're still using your work computer. It's getting messy. And with COVID-19, most employers and employees are working from home, and the attack surface just expanded. I mean, my favorite example was when somebody was jumping from a work environment to ABC Mouse to help their kid to Canva, which then had a breach. So it was just it's been getting crazy. So we need to make sure that everything is taken care of. And it's always good to know if the dark web is actually hunting and recruiting your employees, because people are getting side hustles, right? And Natasha, you're probably going to speak to this a little bit later, because they really do look like legitimate
Yep.
job,
Yeah.
applications. So for whatever reason, and we can be monitoring and measuring sentiment, and we can be getting information from what we're seeing internally. But if people are getting side hustles because a spouse lost work or whatever, you need to understand why and how and what is at stake here, right? So we need to understand that hacking groups are actively recruiting employees, and they're paying 10 times what a legitimate company pays. All right, so here we go. I have this lovely little diagram that my marketing department helped us put together, just so that we understood a little bit of how the overlap works. And for those of you that have joined us, some of you are familiar with Veriato in our internal monitoring services, and some of you are familiar with ID Agent and the dark web monitoring. So we're kind of bringing that together to understand the fact that it does need to be kind of a cohesive stack. And there, I will never, ever, ever, ever say that just one of our solutions out there is going to be your end all be all. I just don't think that's the case. I think you're always going to have holes, but if you have the right security strategy, you have fewer, right? So best security practice is always dictated in multi-layered approach. And it's no different with dark web threats and security. So we're working kind of hand in hand to provide a comprehensive multi-layered security approach. And ID Agent is working from the outside in, as it's scouring the dark web and alerting you to credentials. And again, I'll let Natasha talk to that in a moment. And then for those of you who are not familiar with it, Veriato is working from the inside out. So what we're doing is we're watching all employee behavior to identify imposters on the network. Additionally, we're working on rogue employees who've decided to take advantage of the cash offered, and kind of be that inside man. And we also are the ones that are kind of giving you that sentiment value, where we can sort of see what the norm is and then alert you to anomalies, which that is probably the most clutch offering inside of your environment, so that you can then track, trust but verify, but then utilize an outside service to see what's going on, and actually get verification. And with that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Natasha. So I'm going to release my control of the screen.
Awesome.
So it is
All
all
right.
you.
Perfect. Let me just get this sharing here. Oh, I don't know that I can share screen as just an organizer. Hang on one
Should be.
second. Here we go.
Hey, there we go.
All right, hang on just one second. Let me get this in presentation mode. Perfect. Oh, come on.
It's
There
thinking.
we
There we go.
go. Perfect. So Alex, thank you so much, and for everyone joining us this afternoon or morning or evening, depending on where you're calling in from. As Alex mentioned, I'm Natasha Boyko. This title is a little bit old. There's been some things shifting around as of the last week or so. But I have been with ID Agent specifically for just about 3 years now. Came on board as one of the first employees and really helped build what is kind of now our partner program, and kind of how we're working with all of our customers to make sure that they're utilizing the program and the platform, and that they're having success and they're able to roll this out pretty quickly. To
Wait,
give
do
you
I
some
have your more
background,
updated one? Your updated title on the slide?
you do, yes.
I do.
Director,
Okay.
you
So
do,
you're
yes. This
slacking,
one
I'm
is
on top of it, is what you're telling me.
exactly. Well,
Okay,
I
cool.
think
Just want to make
you
sure.
jumped the gun a little. You jumped the gun a little bit because it hasn't been made official. So you guys are all getting a
Ooh, we
sneak
got the
preview
sneak
here. But
peek.
to give you guys just a little bit of background on ID Agent, if you're not familiar, so we have been kind of in this space for, oh gosh, it's been since about 2017. And essentially, what our goal was when building Dark Web ID, our platform, was to be able to give businesses visibility into credentials that have been exposed within their organization. So basically, giving you an alerting platform that will show you and kind of tell you exactly when your employees' emails and passwords have been compromised and are out on the dark web. So what this visibility essentially gives you, one, you can take immediate action to change those passwords and to communicate to the employee. But what it does is allows you to really start building a security stack on top of that that allows you to make informed decisions on things like security awareness training, things like phishing simulation, password managers, backup, all of those things that go into your security stack. Dark Web ID can act as that ground level, or that kind of first look into what's going on, and it helps you make really informed and better decisions around cybersecurity. So we launched back in 2017, and as of now, we're up to, I think, over 4,000 customers and partners now. So it's been a crazy ride. But what, having this massive growth has also really allowed us to add enhancements and features into the platform that are coming directly from our customers, that are coming from direct feedback. So what my goal is today to kind of talk to you guys is actually not so much about our product, but more so about the current landscape of cybersecurity, how it's evolving in 2020 given the current climate, and what it actually means to have a compromised credential, and kind of what journey that credential can take as a cyber criminal gets his or her hands on it. So this first slide here, just to kind of kick things off, right? So we talk a lot about compromised credentials. You see things on the news all the time coming from LifeLock and your credit reporting companies. A compromised credential is essentially an email address and a password that a cyber criminal has gotten a hold of, and they are then attempting to sell or auction off this data on the dark web. What ultimately kind of happens from these credentials is that it can end up in a breach. And what is scary about a breach when we're thinking about the small to medium-sized business market is how well can you recover from a data breach, right? So if you look at all of these statistics here, I'm not going to go through all of these, but across the board, you look, the majority of these breaches are happening because of a compromised credential. So it's because of your employees clicking on something they shouldn't, downloading something they shouldn't, accidentally giving away the keys to the network without even realizing it. So that's how these breaches are ultimately happening. So what our goal with Dark Web ID is to give you insight into that first breakdown, that first time the credential is stolen, so that you can plug that hole so that it doesn't end up resulting in a breach. Because what we see is that these small to medium-sized businesses don't recover from that because they either don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the money, they don't have the time, or even just generally the knowledge of how to handle one of these breaches. So that's why we always say it's better to partner with someone that can kind of do this for you versus trying to figure it out on your own. Thinking about kind of what's the cybersecurity framework, how should you be looking at all of this, especially given the fact that everyone's credentials have been compromised at this point. You kind of have to go into it under the assumption that everyone has been compromised, and it isn't about stopping the compromise, it's about having visibility into when it happens. And then ultimately thinking about building your cybersecurity framework around this concept of zero trust, which is making sure that the right people have the right secure access to the right machines with the right privilege, and then ultimately monitoring for that compromise. and kind of thinking about cybersecurity kind of within these lines and making sure that you've got all of these boxes checked off. And then with that also comes kind of hand in hand compliance and privacy laws. And I'm not going to go into all of this in detail, but just wanted to just make it clear that this is not just something that's happening to big businesses, to Fortune 500 companies. This is now coming down to the SMB, to the small and medium-sized business space. So Europe set the bar a couple of years ago with GDPR, and now we're seeing it here in the States. Just about every state now has some variation of a compliance and privacy law. California and New York kind of mimicked GDPR the most, just in terms of scope and severity. But basically what this is doing is forcing businesses to take cybersecurity seriously, forcing them to realize that if my data is compromised, if my customers' data is compromised, I'm held liable for that. And I need to make sure that I'm reporting it and that I'm making all of the right kind of policy decisions and steps along the way to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence to protect my business and my employees. And kind of, right along with that, when you think about, where does this threat actually come from, right? So it isn't just about Active Directory and looking at kind of internally what's happening, where that's super important and that, you do that through a variety of mechanisms. What we're focused on is the threat that's coming in from outside of the organization. So if you think about your employees, you have created accounts on all different sorts of websites. So things like ADP, so you can monitor your payroll. Things like HubSpot, so you can monitor your customers and their data. E-commerce, maybe I'm responsible for ordering all of the office supplies. Things like Dropbox, bank accounts, all of this, we're creating accounts that are work related, but they're third-party websites. And what happens with human behavior, we're using the same password or same variation of a password for all of these different accounts, right? Who wants to remember 75 unique passwords, right? So you're creating similar passwords so that it's easy to remember and your job isn't interrupted by having to track down a password or reset a forgotten password. But the risk in that, as you all are aware, I'm sure, is that once one of these websites gets breached and once that data is stolen, the cyber criminal can then test that against all of these other accounts. And I'll give you a quick story here of an example. So we had a customer, one of our partners who was reselling dark web ID, and they were at a sales meeting with one of their potential prospects, and they ran a dark web scan through our platform, and I'll show you what that looks like a little bit later. But they ran a dark web scan, and instantly it comes up with all of the employees that have been compromised, showing their emails and passwords. And the owner of the business looked at the report and was like, wait a second, that employee no longer works here. We fired her 3 years ago. She's been terminated. She's not at the company anymore. But what really kind of piqued her interest is when she looked at that password that had been compromised, it was a password that she recognized. And she was like, wait a second, literally walks out of the meeting, goes out to the floor of the office and pulls up a Post-it note, lo and behold, that had that exact password written down on it, and logged in to their current bank account. And there it was, access to all of their cash, all of their credit lines, everything right there 3 years later after this employee had been terminated. So what that showed was that it's not just about current employees, it's about previous employees and kind of what they've created accounts for and kind of where, their credentials were, but also it, came to light that they have a really terrible offboarding process because they just told this person, just write down your passwords and we'll deal with it, and then just kept them on a Post-it note and never changed the passwords. So that was such an eye-opening moment for that business owner, because if they hadn't seen that report, who knows when they would have changed that password, but it was currently out there on the dark web for the taking. And that is a serious risk. And to be honest, that's sort of an extreme version of that story, but we hear things like that all the time, of just passwords that are actively floating around out there. We had a managed service provider that ran a scan on themselves and found their active CRM. So their like Salesforce password out there, and they were able to log in, and there's all their clients' information, all their data. And if you aren't continuously monitoring for that exposure, you're not aware of it until ultimately something really bad happens.
Hey, Natasha, do me a huge favor because I know that
Yeah.
a lot of the people that are joining us are not necessarily the IT people that you and I are so used to dealing with. Will you just give like a high level on what exactly the dark web is? Because I know that some of the people
Sure.
I actually just got a couple of questions where it was one of those, I still don't know what it is.
Yep.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
perfect.
So, um, basically, if you think about kind of and I'll just keep this very kind of high level, but if you think of, broadly speaking, the internet that we use every day, right? So going to Google, searching for things, going to websites, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever it is, that's kind of the publicly facing internet. That's what we're all using every day. The dark web is, if you think of it kind of like an iceberg, where the regular kind of publicly facing internet is that tip of the iceberg that's outside of the water. The dark web is everything that's below. So essentially, so there's kind of two levels. There's the dark web and the deeper web, but it's an area of the internet that is only accessible by very specific software. It is designed to be an untraceable, untrackable environment, so it's anonymous. And essentially, it is primarily used for these nefarious activities that we talk about, things like, selling credentials, selling data, selling financial information, all the way up to the really, really bad stuff, selling weapons, selling drugs, etc. And then there's also parts of the dark web that are used for positive, reasons, things like, the government using that for, intelligence and different things they're using to communicate maybe to, different agencies and things like that. But ultimately, the dark web is an area of the internet that is not accessible unless you have very specific software and training that allows you to access it. It's not, anyone just can't go to www.darkweb.com. It's
Right. We're not
something
going
that,
to trip into it,
right. But if you
which I've
are
done
trained,
accidentally, but
right, if you're trained and you understand and you have the right tools, you can get on there. And again, it's just a very anonymous, untraceable, you're not going to get like a browser history, things like that. So it's where these activities happen, kind of a full spectrum of not so dangerous to very dangerous. So what I'll do now, and that's kind of perfect transition to go into, I've got a bunch of screenshots of different databases and different parts of the dark web that our analysts have found. So to give you just a quick background, our team is comprised of a bunch of analysts that are living and breathing in the dark web. Their goal and their job is continuously monitoring these identity theft forums, message boards, kind of hacker social media profiles, all different sorts of areas of the dark web where they're looking for these credentials that have been exposed. And in doing so, they send us some screenshots of things that they see. So I'll go through some of these now. So this is one, Alex kind of alluded to this earlier, a job posting from this organization called the Dark Overlord. They're looking for software designers and systems engineers, 10 years of experience. Annual salary there is massive, as you can see. So, again, it's very lucrative, very kind of enticing for someone to think, oh, I can do this for my living room, right? So, again, it's legitimate. It's something that you might see on LinkedIn or Indeed. So these job postings we see pop up quite frequently, and they're always very interesting to see that money that's attached to it. Next, we've got, and I'm losing my cursor here. Oh, here we go. So this is the Clone Card Crew, as I slam into the desk here. The Clone Card Crew is an organization that essentially sells data dumps of credit cards. So you can look and see that they're very curated. So you've got ones that are EU specific. So in Europe, you've got US visas with different balances. all sorts of different Verizon accounts. These are different, basically just credit card information, and everything on there is very much customer service driven. So you see that you get discrete FedEx standard overnight shipping. They get reviews. So thank you for giving us a chance to provide you the best credit cards. It's very much run like an Etsy or an eBay, where it's a marketplace for these criminals. And it's, obviously very interesting to see kind of the cost that's associated. So $90 per card, $170 per card. So not super expensive there, but again, you're getting the kind of peace of mind that you're dealing with a very reputable criminal here. Here's another one that is a database of California business owners, high credit scores. This one's actually out of stock, so it was so popular that it sold out. You can see the different ways that you can purchase these. Anytime you see the word FULZ, F-U-L-L-Z, on a data set, that means that there is enough information provided for you to be able to commit full identity fraud. So for you to fully take on the identity of that individual, which for anyone that has had any type of data stolen, in terms of credit information or financial records, how much of a complete nightmare it is to be able to recover from that. So now you can see kind of how easy it is for that to happen on the dark web. Here's another one. This is Denmark credit cards, buy 3, get 1 free. Again, you see like the information here, you see what kind of format you're getting for the cards, high quality, all the cards are valid and live, vendor level and trust level. So again, like we think about, I'll only buy something from Amazon if it's, has 4 or 5 stars. Here we're looking at the dark web, and this is a vendor level of 4, high trust level. So they're getting the same types of reviews and rankings as they would if they were selling something legitimate. And again, it's only $39 US for one of these credit cards. Beyond credit cards, we see a lot of things like passports. So this is a passport and a utility bill. So for anyone that's trying to, maybe open up a new account or, do more along the lines of that identity theft or identity fraud, here's an easy way for you to get a French passport scan and a utility bill, and it's only $13 US. ID card, both sides. This vendor is a level 5, $6.60. So again, just giving you guys examples of the legitimacy and just kind of how easy it is for all of this to be purchased. Here you've got another one. You can get a discount if you buy it in bulk. This is German EU company credit cards. Again, so just massive amounts of these types of posts all the time, giving different sets of data there. Here's one that probably is of no surprise to everyone here. As we moved into this new world of working from home and working remotely, cyber criminals were like, oh, wait a second, you know what? I bet everyone is using online meetings now. Let's hack into this stuff. So Zoom was the first one that kind of came under attack. I say the first one because I'm sure there will be more that come out of these different video conferencing sites. Hackers got in, stole a bunch of Zoom accounts, and they actually just put them for just up on the dark web, not necessarily for sale, but just had them up there. Obviously it's only negative intentions of using these logins, hacking into meetings. I think we've all seen videos online of people hacking into various meetings and doing things that they shouldn't be doing. We saw some examples of classrooms being hacked into. Again, as we think about these worldwide trends and different events that are happening and kind of things that are growing in popularity, that immediately raises the flag for a cyber criminal as an opportunity. So we would hope that as the world is going through a global pandemic and things are falling apart as we've never seen before, that cyber criminals would be like, all right, I'll give them a break. Let's take a back seat here for a little bit. it was the, obviously the exact opposite, right? This was the moment they've been waiting for. They're finally ready now to prey on a very vulnerable population and just go to town with various cyber attacks and different things that are happening. And I'm going to go into some of those kind of nuanced COVID-19 related attacks in a second here, but one that started popping up towards the end of last year that we've seen is this idea of ransomware and public extortion. So ransomware, for those who aren't familiar, is essentially a cyber criminal has gotten a hold of your data, has shut everything down, and is saying if you want to get your data back, you'll have to pay X amount of money. And the general guidance has always been, don't pay the ransom, because even if you do pay the ransom, you're likely not going to get your data back completely anyway. So cyber criminals were like, all right, well, we'll step up our game then. So if you're not willing to pay me the ransom, I'm going to tell you that I'm just going to release your data anyway out on the dark web for the sheer purpose of publicly extorting you and kind of shaming you into this scenario. So we saw this with TravelX, the big foreign exchange company. They ended up ultimately paying a $2.3 million ransom just to get their systems back online because they couldn't handle the downtime as they were trying to figure this out. So again, cyber criminals are getting smarter. They're getting more and more sneaky about how they're dealing with this stuff. And it's just becoming a lot harder for organizations to kind of navigate this ever changing and ever evolving attack kind of world. And especially if you are trying to do all of this in-house and you're handling this on your own, it's really important to have great technology partners and great, platforms that can really help you kind of navigate these, just very confusing and just interesting kind of times of what do I do in this scenario? What am I supposed to do here? Ransomware as a service is another really interesting one. So this is basically you sign up $200, $300 a month and you get this really great platform that will show you, you enter in all of your targets, all the people that you want to send ransomware to. They've got ready-made campaigns for you, super easy. And this is the ability for you to start attacking lots of organizations and not have to do all of the work on your own. And then kind of switching gears into phishing. So this is where cyber criminals are having a field day right now. So basically, phishing is someone that sends out a fake email with the sole purpose of stealing the data. So someone clicking on that email and either unintentionally downloading malware onto their machine or giving away credentials, giving away data. Phishing's always been very popular, but gone are the days of it just being, a Nigerian prince asking for you to sponsor him or her or whatever. Now it's becoming much more sophisticated, a lot harder for individuals to discern what's real and what's fake. And this is an example of phishing kits that are available on the dark web. So you purchase these phishing kits, all the coding is there, super easy. And then you're able to send out, a Facebook landing page, for example, and one of these is real and one of these is fake. And if you look at them, especially at quick glance, they look identical, right? Imagine if you're just quickly scrolling through a mobile device on your phone, it'd be really hard to tell these apart. So it becomes a lot easier for these cyber criminals to launch these phishing attacks. And of course, we're seeing just with COVID-19, phishing attacks are surging. And if you think about it, we're all a lot more stressed out. We're more on edge. We're dealing with a lot more than we used to if we were just sitting in our office, right? Maybe you're at home now and you've got a spouse working from home in the room next door. You've got kids here that you're now responsible for teaching as well. You've got lots of stuff going on, and you're also probably a little bit scared. You're concerned. You want to keep up with the news. You want to understand what's happening and be up to date. So cyber criminals are taking advantage of that. And they are sending emails. This one looks like it's coming from the CDC, and we've got a couple of just different ways that you can spot these here. But basically kind of capitalizing on the fact that if I'm just scrolling through my phone really quickly, it's going to be a lot harder for me to understand that this is not real. And if I see an email come through that says an updated list of new cases, I'm going to want to see that, right? Like you're going to want to see that. The second you download that PDF, this is not going to be a legitimate website. This is probably going to download something on your machine. So we got lots of examples of these. Here's another one that looked like it was coming from the World Health Organization. And there's lots of different ways that you can identify these. And what's really important, and kind of the message that I want to reiterate, is that with proper education and with proper just policies and procedures for your employees, you can get ahead of this and you can help educate them on how to spot these emails, how to spot a phishing email that comes through, so that maybe you don't stop every single one, but maybe people take 10 more seconds, 20 more seconds to review an email when it comes in, and they kind of think about it twice. They think about it again or a little bit more carefully. We saw them coming through via text message as well, so it's not just coming on your email. This is a UK example, but I had a bunch of people here in the US that were getting text messages coming from what looked like the federal government about the stimulus package. So again, it's things that we want to be informed, it's things that we want to be on top of, and it's just really easy for cyber criminals to launch these attacks. I've got a couple of little infographics here that I'll just wrap up with, and we can definitely share these with you. But basically, this is our attempt at being a little bit humorous. The CDC recommends you take at least 20 seconds to wash your hands. We recommend taking at least 20 seconds to review an email. So it's, nothing overly complicated, but if you're keeping this type of security awareness at top of mind for your employees, you're more likely to create a culture of cybersecurity where they're not afraid to raise their hand. They're not afraid to say, I think I clicked on something I shouldn't have, or hey, can you take a look at this? I just want to make sure it's legitimate before I move forward. And then another one here, again, just about protecting your employees, and just lots of great reminders of, in this time right now when you're dealing with your employees all over the place, potentially logging in from insecure networks, or are they giving their work laptop to their kid at the end of the day so they can play a video game or whatever it is. All of these new things that you have to worry about that you likely didn't have to worry about as much before are now becoming an everyday reality. And with that comes so many more gaps in security and potential footholds for these cyber criminals to get their foot in the door. And the last thing that anyone needs to deal with right now, when we're already dealing with so much, is a data loss, or having your system shut down by a hacker and having to figure out ransom or whatever it may be. So really, it's the name of the game when we're talking about ID Agent and Dark Web ID, our platform, is about having visibility and training and creating awareness with your employees so that cybersecurity is something that they're thinking about all the time. So this next slide I'm going to share. So Alex was kind enough to share with me the attendees that had signed, or the people that had signed up for this webinar ahead of time. And what I actually did was run the domains of all of the organizations that had signed up through our platform. So granted, this number is including everyone that registered but not necessarily showed up. So there's a little bit of, it's not necessarily everyone on this call right now. However, the number is quite impressive of the number of people that have current compromised credentials, or the number of organizations that have compromised credentials on the dark web as of an hour ago. So 45,191 compromises across everyone that had registered for this webinar. That's a pretty high number. So, what we want to do for you, as an attendee of this webinar, is offer you a free dark web scan so you can see your company's individual scan. That way we can show you exactly what's out there. The report will show username or email address and password of that individual that was compromised, and we'll give you that full report for free. So definitely wanted to just share that number. Obviously a little bit of shock factor there that is quite large. But what that does mean is that, again, this is such a widespread issue and affects so many people that it's so important to have that visibility so you can really see what's going on out there. Um, and what I think I'll do, actually, because it looks like I've got a couple of minutes here. Alex, is it okay if I jump into the platform real quick?
Actually, we are running low on
Oh,
time.
okay.
So if we have time a little bit after, that would be awesome because I think that they
Sure.
would like to see it. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but I want to be cognizant of everybody's time, and
Sure.
I seriously urge anybody that is interested in learning about ID Agent or Veriato, let's get you guys on some demos so that you can actually see the platforms if we go over a little bit more. Um,
Sure.
but if you don't mind, I'm going to steal the screen.
Sure. Absolutely. Let me
Thank
just stop sharing here.
All right, can you guys see my screen?
I don't think we're seeing your screen. Oh,
How about
yep,
now?
there you go.
You got it?
Yep.
All right. All right, guys. So this is why I really wanted Natasha to go first, because with this type of dark web monitoring and understanding how your employees are being really targeted, especially right now, it's so important to understand how everything merges together and works together. So again, I'm Alex Courson with Veriato, Director of Business Development and Sales. And it's really just seeing if there's a hole inside the security strategy, right? So just a really quick history of us. We are about 20 years old plus, give or take some. And we have gone through a little bit of a rebrand. We used to formerly be known as SpecterSoft, and we're deployed in over 3,000 organizations worldwide, including 6 of the top 10 tech companies, 7 of the top 10 financials, 8 of the top 10 healthcare, and we actually just won the Gold Award as the best insider threat solution from Cybersecurity Insiders. And I think that's part to do with the fact that we do hustle and find educational resources for you all. So this is another poll right here that I just kind of want to go over and just see who knows what's going on, right? So what percent of the data breaches involve insiders? And I don't think there's a poll question inside, but I'd be interested to know if you all want to pop in the questions, if you guys think you know the answers. If it's 10%, 30%, 60%, or 90. And it looks like we're getting a couple, but shockingly, we're actually at about 60%. And 15% of that, though, is from inadvertent insiders. So I really don't want to paint a picture of doom and gloom and the fact that, you've got insider threats, that they're all malicious. And half the time, I mean, not half the time, but 15% of the time to 20% of the time, it's not from people that have malicious intent. It's just from people doing stupid. So what we want to do is we want to prevent that from happening, and understanding that the people that you employ are your most valuable asset, but they also happen to be your highest liability. So if you guys can put that together and understand that, it's going to do you a world of good when you're planning. And then you can actually use that with Veriato or an ID agent to kind of trace back. So this slide is from a survey that we recently conducted that actually asked companies how mature their insider threat strategy is. And as you can see, most companies actually have a relatively immature insider threat security program. But what we did was we learned some interesting things from those companies that do have insider threat programs. What we learned, excuse me, is that everything's kind of all about the data, right? It's not about spying on their employees. It's not really about, being that big brother, right? It's about the customer, and it's about keeping their credit card information, their social security numbers, their patient data, the HIPAA compliances, as Natasha was telling us earlier about GDPR. It's about keeping that PII safe, right? And then second, What they did was they realized that insider breaches can be the worst type of breach because it affects stock prices, it ends careers, it puts companies on the 6 o'clock news, and anybody that says that any news is good news is crazy, because I've been on crisis management teams where you have to really wheel that back, right? So we need to make sure that we are preparing for that every step of the way. And what you're looking at is that every company protects every single endpoint from external threats with an antivirus, with firewalls, with a whole lot of little things, right, that kind of create that stack. But a spotty approach to insider threats using some DLP, access controls, and network analysis isn't enough. Okay, so that's when we're talking external threat security. And then when we go a little bit further, you see a mature insider strategy protects all the endpoints because no one really can predict when or where a breach is going to happen. And you're looking at user and entity behavior analytics are giving full contextual understanding. And that's something that's really, really important, guys. That full context and understanding motive, understanding, I mentioned before, sentiment, and giving that holistic endpoint solution and security so that you understand that, okay, this person maybe went outside of the geolocation fencing, or maybe this person went out and accessed a website that they don't typically access. And then you get an alert based on that. Now, instead of just going and firing her or him, you then have to use the rest of your tools, which hopefully at that point is something like an ID agent, where you are referencing it and saying, okay, they did this, but was it really them, or was it a hacker, or was it something that was compromised online, right? Because again, with this new normal of what we're dealing with now, you just don't know until you know. So another question for you that it's funny because I was in the backup world for the last 2, 3 years before I came back to the insider threat world, and the statistic that I was giving was out of date because typically to discover an insider threat, I was saying that it took about 197 days, typically if you don't have any sort of insider threat detection. Now, the average number of days to detect a data breach is 206 if you don't have anything in place. Okay, so we want to make sure that you have all of that. Um, and I was going to go ahead and show our platform, but again, I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. So I'm going to skip over it and let you guys see it when we schedule out a demo. And I will send out I'll definitely send out a link to a demo video, and we can go ahead and also throw out some of the specials and the incentives as well. But I do want to talk a little bit about how it's deployed, because a lot of you may be wondering, if this is something that's in the cloud, is it on-prem? What is it, just based on the nature of the software itself? So Cerebral is taking an investigative tool and a predictive analysis tool, combining it together. And it is software based, but it requires a SQL database. And hold on, guys, I apologize. I have a dog that's going insane. Right, sorry about that, guys. So we are from our management console, you can actually remotely push Cerebral Agent out to the endpoint machines, PCs, Macs, and Androids. We do not work on iOS. And the agent deploys and runs in stealth mode unless you choose to make it available for your employees to understand. And so now we can also have the ability to answer questions quickly and accurately, right? So we've got, from an insider threat perspective, you've got data exfiltration, and you've got investigations, and you can view screenshots. But you also have, from a productivity standpoint, where you can just see what employees are doing, right? So that's kind of a big deal right now, because you want to see where their focus is. Are they actively working in the applications you want them to be working in? Or maybe they're just spacing out on YouTube right now because you don't know. So we want to make sure, and frankly, it doesn't matter, right? Because you've got what is important what their productivity is, what their output is, and maybe you don't care that they're on Facebook all day as long as they're getting their work done. Maybe it's happening at 10 p.m., but at least you then have that intel and you can work from there. And so what clients are typically looking for with an insider threat detection is productivity, right? So you want to see who's working, who's not. And we want to identify any threat. So if it is a threat, we're going to immediately alert the security team. And these alerts can be based on behavior anomalies, custom keywords, data movement, or even compromised credentials. So exactly what ID Agent is finding on the outside, we're looking for at a very, very granular, descriptive internal space. Oops, I went the wrong way. And we're almost done, guys. Guys, thanks so much for your patience. I really appreciate it. We've got about 4 more minutes. Um, what I want to go through here is just where Veriato AI with our smart learning technology and our machine learning, which is probably the only one on the market that gives you machine learning that is true machine learning and not just bringing in Boolean logic, which we did 10 years ago. But everybody else out there is kind of using that now. We've just been able to define the industry and define the market so much that we have now moved on. So we've got real AI, real machine learning, and the Veriato AI is analyzing all that user activity on the endpoints, including emails, chats, web usage. We've got files transferred, network usage, geofencing, psycholinguistics, and more in order to make sure that we are setting the norm, right? So you can see what people are doing, but it's not just about seeing what they're doing. It's also kind of starting and setting that baseline so you know what's normal and you know what is out of character. And I'm going back to the productivity thing just because, again, it is the new normal, right? So we want to make sure that when Cerebral is identifying a threat, it immediately is alerting the security team. But this one particular person is in the accounting department and we know this guy and we had lunch with him last week and should we really start a lengthy investigation to see what he's up to? Or can we just look at his productivity, right? So if you see a light color, you know that he's actively clicking, scrolling, typing, doing things. When you see that dark, you see that it's not actually active. He's inactive. Maybe he's got video in the background. Maybe he's in a meeting. Maybe he's listening to a webinar, right? So you have the ability to see what's going on as opposed to assuming and just kind of looking at screenshots, which screenshots are great and we have those too. But it's a lot more interesting when you have the anomaly alerting and you have that intel, right? Then we go through and we actually have alerting and enterprise risk scoring. So we work directly with your team to set up and deploy Cerebral, and we also have on-premise cloud deployment options. So that's really where we kind of go in and try to start working a little bit more hand in hand with the solutions out there, similar to an ID agent. And I just went through those slides real fast because honestly, it's a little bit redundant and I don't want to waste too much of your time because I do want to be cognizant. We're wrapping up here and I want to give you guys some time for questions if we need it. But just to really summarize and surmise what we have between the two, you've got full visibility both inside and outside. You've got full confidence, so you don't have to do lengthy internal investigations as long as you have something in place going back 30 days. If you pull in an investigation tool and just sort of drop it in, you can't really go back, right? So you want to have something that's a little bit more proactive for the most part, and that's both from the external and the internal perspective. However, the one thing I will say about ID Agent is that if you did see what Natasha was talking about earlier, and Natasha, you can probably attest to this, you've got the ability to go back. Is it complete backlogs to see all of the all of the discrepancies and the data breaches from that entire domain ever, or is there a cutoff point for you all?
So our data goes back to about 2009, 2010, but
Okay.
you get all of that information.
Cool. So with ID Agent, you probably would need to at least to have it in place to keep on going so that you're proactive going forward, but you can get some of that backlog back. With Veriato and Cerebral, you do need it in place so that you can actually put together a full plan. So I hope that makes sense. Um, do we have any questions, comments, concerns? All right, we've got one of you all saying, "How do we buy?" So there's that. We actually have our information listed on the webinar, so you can reach out to both Natasha and myself. My email is acourson, that's ACOURSON, at veriato.com. And then we've got Natasha, and is it N Boyko or is it Natasha Boyko at ID
It's
Agent?
N Boyko. I'll type it into the chat box right now. So N
Perfect, perfect.
Boyko at idagent.com. Or you can also reach out to sales at idagent.com to get a demo set up.
Hmm.
And there was a question that I saw come through about the reports, the free dark web scan. So we will not
Yes,
be automatically sending those out to everyone. So if you are interested in getting a copy of your company's dark web scan, just shoot me an email and we'll make sure to get that over to you.
absolutely. And we do have a question that says, what is the difference between this and DLP? So DLP is your data loss prevention, where you can have your controls and you can actually prevent access to specific points. That is fine. We actually offer a DLP solution on with our software as well. However, DLP is only as good as DLP rules. And if you see somebody doing something internally where they are changing for example, exporting, accessing something that they actually should have access to, but maybe changing the name and then emailing it out, taking things via USB. DLP really is not going to be your full solution, and it's not going to give you any alerts like that, as well as the proactivity of setting that norm, the baseline, and then alerting you to any sentiment. So DLP is part of your stack, but by no means is it the full solution. And we never ever ever would let you even purchase our DLP without the other stuff because it just wouldn't make sense, right? But I can go into that more with you offline. And it looks like we may have one more. Hold on. You're welcome. All right, guys. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up because, again, I want to be cognizant of your time. We do have some more questions open, but I would like to allow for anybody to email us or reach out directly to us or come on and ask for any sort of demos. More than happy to do it. My apologies that we were going over a little bit, but I have a feeling that we're going to be doing another one of these pretty soon. So talk to you all soon, and thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Bye. Oh, South America. Yes, we are. Okay, bye.